Well, hey there. I got a new phone. My old channel was Rose Sweet on YouTube. Um, I was prompted about, what was it, 3 months ago, I guess, to just start putting up some videos. And of course, when I do a self reflection on that, why would I do that? Um, and I began realizing the changes that are taking place. It's not for my benefit, it's to put a perspective out there on how I experience who I am as a result of everything that I've experienced on my own particular sequenced timeline. Okay? So, what prompted to do this was a video that I just got done watching because I do have friends in the spiritual community that are very much aware of all the changes that are taking place. They're very aware of all the harvesting programs that existed here, if you will, in which, for lack of a long explanation, not only was the great living spirit of Mother Earth, who was here on this planet under complete assault, okay, but so was the DNA assemblies that she had put together. And the reason for that is quite simple. If you go back and you look at the original copy of the human genome that God put together, on the female side, she used her DNA. She used DNA from the progenitors. And if you've ever seen a picture of a progenitor that was on display, I believe it was in Barcelona, Spain. I used to have a picture of it, but that library's gone. I'm trying to retrieve it because it's on another phone because of the nature of Facebook and the AI. Well, it's just like why I had to get a phone to do this. When I was putting up the videos that I did on a Rose Suite, the AI Find decided I'm not going to allow you to put any more of these videos up on that channel. So it turned my camera off. I couldn't even record nothing. I couldn't post nothing. So I just threw the phone away and just went and got another one under another ISP. Okay? And in that process, unfortunately, I lost the library that I had access to because it knows that I was using thousands of images or illustrations that I was using to sort of demonstrate how different units of consciousness experience who they are in a morphogenetic field structure, which essentially is the communication that is taking place between all units of consciousness that are plugged into the living battery of this planet that runs on 60 hertz, 110 volts, and 220 amps of electrical service. So you know that you're an electrical appliance. Okay? So, as I've explained before, what is the function of an electron? Work of the mind. So what is the waste product of an electron? Acid. So now you begin to realize why it is that the physical body in this DNA assembly has alchemizers, or if you will, alkalizers, which is the pancreas and the stomach. And why is that? To get rid of the waste product. Okay? So the use of an electron is based on what it is you're experiencing, your state of consciousness. Okay? So the reason that this sort of ties into this video that I just got done watching, which as I remember is called Palladian Knowledge. And so because of what I call the alt media community that is, it's sort of like everybody's grasping at straws. Why are all these changes happening? Hey, I'm sort of waking up. I'm beginning to realize things that I wasn't aware of before, but now I'm aware of them now, right? Well, as I've done in previous videos, to sort of sum it up, what I experienced when I was in my childhood, when I was 4 years of age, I read a newspaper and I realized by reading, again, this is what's presented to me. So in other words, there's me, my state of consciousness, my soul, my spirit. And then I pick up a newspaper and I read the newspaper and I realize it was a drain of my energy. So I was experiencing the state of consciousness that had written what was in that newspaper. Now I'm experiencing what that information represents. I don't want to experience that because that doesn't represent what a state of love and joy is, living in peace, love, harmony, and balance with the rest of the universe. So who wants to experience that newspaper? I don't, so I throw it in the trash. So the same was true of, for example, when the black and white TVs first came out in the 1950s, and I told my mother and father, that TV's trying to program you. Okay? And the reason that you realize this is because you know that you're in a magnetic recorder, that your experiences are being magnetically recorded. And those events, which represent an experience, which is an algorithm, which is a vibrational speed of the wave, okay? So you're experiencing the wave, okay? So if your normal resonant field is to experience what I call purple light, which is 900 megahertz, because I pushed that before on the east side of the Big Island. I took a picture of it, so I was able to take a picture of what I was projecting. It was being reflected back to me. That energy I just absolutely love to experience and project it into the grid. So that's called a resonant field. That's our normal resonant field. That's the energy that we love to experience. So we know that we thrive on high-speed waves. Okay? So when you're thriving on those high-speed waves, you're not tied to anything that represents what the past is. Because the energy that you're experiencing in the present moment is so beautiful and magnificent to experience, okay, that every subsequent moment that you're experiencing through your creative imagination is being experienced by the energy that you're using to experience it with. That becomes the projection and the reflection back to you. That's who you are. That's your state of consciousness. That's the essence of your soul and your spirit that you're experiencing. You're experiencing being you. That's your energy. Okay? So, for example, as I explained to a guy this afternoon, his state of consciousness was not experiencing a state of love and joy. I was experiencing his energy vibrating at a much slower rate of speed. Okay? So, who wants to experience that lower energy? We don't. Not normally, do we? Well, that depends on what you consider to be your normal resonant field. So I can experience the differences in the speeds between the different units of consciousness that are experiencing who they are. Okay? So what I began to realize as a child is that when you record information that is presented to you, okay, and I knew this as a child, that I realized that you got RAM. What is RAM? Read access memory, which means you're writing the recording into your memory. Okay? So for example, and I use this a lot of times, somebody introduces something to you and says, here, this tastes good. Oh, what is it? It's ice cream. Oh, wow. And you taste it, okay? And you go, wow, that's sweet. That tastes good. That experience is recorded in your memory, okay? Now, what is going to dictate whether you do that again? What if I was to tell you that sugar was a waste product of metabolism, which essentially means that by putting something that is sweet in sugar, which is acid, is contributing to the acid that electrons that are being used to experience who you are through your consciousness, you are simply adding to that number. Which means you have to offset that if you want to experience a higher speed by producing greater alkalinity or alkalizing that acid that you're putting in your body. So if you knew, for example, that by drinking a Coke or by consuming sugar, which is a waste product of metabolism, into your body, why would you do that? Because the seeking of, if you will, what they call self-indulgence, or, wow, I just love to experience what the taste of that is. So are you willing to sacrifice, okay, having that experience against what you're going to experience in the future, because you will experience it in the future, by the more toxins or sugar that you put in your body now, can be measured what you experience in the future by your body's inability to alkalize at a rate at which it can maintain homeostasis. So that's why I refer to it as what we call an acidic state of mind programming. Because the experience that you have for the first time is recorded in memory. So you're choosing to re-experience something that was already experienced in the past, but you want to experience it again. So this is why when I've helped others try and do what I call clearing your cache, is by keeping a personal journal. And if you do it on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and I usually start with a daily basis, you can begin to start keeping track by being aware of those things that we do that are trigger mechanisms of stimulus, if you will, that trigger a memory, or if you will, information that's recorded in memory that we want to experience again, or causes us to react in a way in which the reaction is held in memory. So we're simply accessing, if you will, a file, a memory that's in a file that we keep in memory, and then we re-trigger it or re-experience that vibration, that frequency again. So if you wanted to maintain, for example, optimal speed all the time, 24 hours a day, day after day, day after day, day after day, well, you're not held captive to anything that's held in memory, so that every experience that you're happening is based on your conscious, creative imagination, then you would have to find an environment in which your state of consciousness is conducive to be able to do that. Which would mean finding a place in which your mind's energy is not being molested by something else that is running a memory program. Because when you're operating on your conscious creative your conscious creative mind, the only thing that you're aware of, unless you are distracted by something else, by another unit of consciousness that has gotten your attention went from your conscious creative mind to now being attenuated by another unit of consciousness. So if that other unit of consciousness is running a slower speed vibration in consciousness than you are, then you're experiencing something that is less in vibration than the energy that you would be using to manifest in your own mind. Your conscious creative imagination is experiencing that energy, using that energy to experience what it is you created or projected. In your own mind, you thus experience is reflected back to you. So there isn't going to be any difference in the speed between what you project and when it's reflected back to you. That's a real-time experience. Because the speed at which it's being experienced is immediate. It's not like throwing a baseball up against one of those old nets in the past that we used to use to practice throwing the ball, which means you hit a piece of rubber that's sort of tied to a square frame, and the ball comes back to you, sort of like a boomerang, an echo chamber. See? You don't have to wait. Hey, what did I just project? How long is it going to wait for me to be able to experience it on the visible light spectrum? So I realized, for example, that your eyeballs are holographic information processors. You're processing a data stream in a simulation. Okay? And the reason that you know that is because you operate on memory. So there's a difference between memory and no memory. And the difference between no memory and creative conscious imagination is based on speed. So now, if you look at a chart, for example, the speed of the wave, the shorter the wave, the more geometric space that you are filling up in time space. So to exit or to be outside of a clock, you have to be experiencing the wave. It's running at such a high rate of speed, okay? You're not aware of anything that's happening in the past. You're only aware of what it is that you are experiencing in your own mind. And the frame rate is moving so fast from one to the next that there's only one. Because that one is replaced by the next one at such a high rate of speed, you've already forgotten the last one. And I know that because I've experienced that. That's how I know it. And that's the beauty of what it means to be truly free, where your mind is not held captive to a program. Because a program is memory driven. See? So, for example, when somebody writes a program and puts that app up into Google Play, then that program has already been written. What represents how that program runs has already been written, which means it's in the past. Which means when your state of consciousness is using a program that was written, say, a year ago, then you're running something that actually happened or was put together a year ago, but you're running it in your own now time. But you're held captive to the programmer because it wasn't you that created the program. You're running somebody else's system or somebody else's program. So the more programs that you run that weren't created by you, the more that your memory is held captive to running that program, because there's going to be a difference in the speed. Because you're not creating anything. You're not imagining anything. Instead, what you're doing is you're experiencing what the program is allowing you to do. Now, this does not mean, obviously, that you can't use a computer or a software program and then go into your conscious creative mind and then use that computer, for example, as a tool to create something or write a story. But when you write a story, there is a difference in the speed between the story that you're experiencing in your mind, because I've done this many times. Okay? So, for example, sitting around a campfire, and the story that I'm going to tell that hasn't been told yet has actually already happened. Which means that book is already on the shelf. I can tell you exactly where it is in the library, okay? When it was written, when it was published, who put it in there, okay? And then you can go to that library and go read it. But in this case, the example that I use is when you sit around a campfire. So when you sit around a campfire and somebody says, okay, tell us a story, and say, well, here's a story, and I'll just tell them, I'm just going to make this up right on the fly, okay? The difference in the speed, for example, is that in my own mind, let's say, for instance, you had 100 characters. I've had the experience where I have interchangeably deleted, added, taken out, altered the relationships between different beings, and let's just take 100 people. And then we could take a background, like an environment in which those people operate. All the information that is represented by all that pixelated data, in which all those characters are animated and have relationships because they're communicating with each other and they're all telling a story. But I'm the storyteller. So I created the characters, I created the environment in which they operate, and I'm telling the story by which or how each character is communicating with each other to have a relationship, and what all those different relationships that is based on the total story, what everybody's experiencing that is in that story, can now be told to somebody else that is sitting around that campfire. But in my mind, everything that represents what would be in that book has already happened. Okay, and how do I know that? Because I'm the one who wrote the story. So this is where, when you begin to tell that story, you're actually changing what is interchangeable parts, which means interchanging the environment in which all those parts or all those units of consciousness are having a relationship with each other, and change them at a rate of speed that is so fast that the person who is listening to the story can't tell that in your own mind, between the last words that were spoken that they heard related to the story, I deleted 5 characters, added 3 more, changed the environment 5 different times that they didn't even notice. That's the speed at which we can create or imagine how we can just make things up out of thin air that fast and then share that story with somebody else. Right? That's the conscious creative mind at work, being a storyteller. So then somebody would say, yes, but we all don't experience that story on the physical plane. Right? Well, the only reason that doesn't happen is because there isn't enough quantum consciousness energy that is choosing or is aware of that story that is taking place. See? So this is why, like I remember Patty said to us one time about those that were believing in, oh, Nibiru's going to crash into us. Oh my God, Nibiru's going to pass by and crash into us. Which means, conceivably, if enough people believe that that's going to happen, the requirement for everybody else to experience it means that enough units of consciousness have to have enough consciousness energy for all the other units of consciousness that are sharing this morphogenetic field structure to experience it the same way that they're choosing to experience it through their own consciousness. Which means they're manifesting it in their own mind because they believe it's going to happen. So if you believe it's going to happen, then you're using your energy in your mind to put it there. Now we're back to what we choose to experience. Why would you ever want to experience that? Well, because somebody told me that this is what's going to happen and I believed it. You can believe whatever you want to believe. But what you believe is true is based on what? What somebody else told you? So this is why when I was a child growing up, my timeline and the stories that I tell are not held captive by somebody else who wants to write my story for me. Okay? I don't allow others to do that. Otherwise, you're the author of my story, and as we used to say as other children hung out with, I might as well just cut my head off and put it on your head, and you can go live my life for me. And then tell me how it was I was experiencing who I am, because you're the one who's telling me how I'm supposed to experience being me. Well, that's not free will, is it? That's somebody else who's using their consciousness trying to impose their will on you on what it is you're supposed to experience, rather than you choosing to experience what it is of your own free will, your own story, your own journey. Right? So what kind of stories do you love to tell about yourself? What kind of stories do you want to live in? So when you begin to realize that you don't live in any fear because you are what love is in the living spirit, then when you are free to experience what that is, which is who you are, you're not living in any fear of anything. Because you have so much energy at your disposal, which represents what you are in energy that is what you are. My God, you've ever been around people that have that kind of energy? You become an asset. Right? Man, this kind of energy, we love to have this kind of around here. Imagine what this thing can do. This being right here can create anything. What a wild imagination. So if you want to experience being a drill press where the only thing you experience is going up all day long, drilling holes in metal, be a machine. Right? We're not machines. We're living beings, living spirit with a soul. Free will. So when I get into the alt spiritual community and we talk about, well, this is what I know and this is what I experience and this is what I think is going to happen, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I take it all with a grain of salt, see, because I say to myself, well, there's you and there's me. Now, I've never experienced being you because that's your journey, and then there's my journey. Right? So when I think about what it is that I want to experience in the future, I have grand designs of things. You know, things that represent, if you will, what it would be like to climb a ladder to the highest state of consciousness that is possible to experience, right? So that you can experience everything that is possible to experience in the entire cosmos. Right? Which is like, don't leave me behind. So you realize you're in a track meet against your own consciousness to go faster. Now, if you're happy going slow, just like I mentioned the other day to Rod Huff, where apparently Patty had mentioned how Eve, who was Gaia's mother, another goddess, had raised the Elven. And the Elven were perfectly content, basically vibrating at a particular state in which that's their energy, and they're not seeking to, if you will, ascend higher. Well, you can imagine in a galaxy or multiple galaxies that you had a lot of different beings based on the weight of their mass, density, consciousness, are not seeking a pathway in which they can be less dense in mass and instead be in lighter density in mass, in which they're ascending in spirit to experience higher realms. So you can see how the harmony and the balance in a galaxy or a supercluster is very much dependent on what? The harmony and the balance between the densities. Right? How would you collapse a galaxy of consciousness? How would you collapse a supercluster? By its inability to maintain its own harmony and balance, which is maintaining the harmony and balance within the sum of the consciousness units that are there that have an impact on that supercluster. So if you're gaining and gaining and gaining and gaining and gaining in more mass density, which means heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier, that's more weight that the rest of the light, which is running at a higher rate of speed, has to compensate for all the other units of consciousness that are slowing everything down.